Picture this: a weathered pirate captain standing on a tropical beach, looking out at the endless expanse of blue ocean. In popular culture, we imagine him burying a chest filled with gleaming gold coins, marking the spot with a crude X, and sailing away to leave his treasure for future generations. But here's the thing that might surprise you. This romantic image couldn't be further from the truth. The reality of how pirates spent their hard-earned loot is far more fascinating, practical, and frankly, more human than any Hollywood movie has ever portrayed. You see, when we think about pirates and their treasure, we're usually thinking about the wrong kind of treasure altogether. Most pirate treasure wasn't actually gold and silver coins at all. It was cargo: sugar, tobacco, silk, spices, tools, weapons, and everyday goods that could be sold or traded. The actual gold and silver that pirates managed to get their hands on was often spent faster than you could say pieces of eight, and for reasons that reveal just how precarious and short-lived the pirate lifestyle really was. The fundamental truth about pirate economics is this: pirates didn't save for retirement, because most of them didn't expect to live long enough to retire. The average career of a pirate lasted only about 2 to 3 years before they were either killed in battle, executed by authorities, died from disease, or drowned in a shipwreck. When you're living with the constant knowledge that tomorrow might be your last day, your spending priorities become very different from those of ordinary people. This mindset created a unique economic ecosystem around pirate ports throughout the Caribbean, the American colonies, and beyond. Places like Nassau in the Bahamas, Port Royal in Jamaica, and Tortuga became legendary, not just as pirate havens, but as centers of rapid economic circulation, where vast sums of money would change hands in a matter of days or even hours. Pirates would arrive with their pockets full of Spanish silver and leave completely broke. But, having lived like kings for their brief time on land, the Spanish treasure fleet system that dominated Caribbean trade routes was the primary source of pirate wealth. And understanding how this system worked helps explain why pirates spent money the way they did. Every year, enormous convoys of Spanish galleons would sail from ports in Mexico and South America, loaded with silver from the mines of gold, from Colombian rivers, emeralds, from Nueva Granada pearls, from Venezuelan waters, and exotic goods from across the Spanish Empire. These treasure fleets were the economic lifeline of Spain, carrying wealth that would be worth billions in today's currency. The Spanish tried to protect these fleets with naval escorts and strict sailing schedules, but the sheer volume of wealth involved made them irresistible targets for pirates. A single successful attack on a treasure fleet could set a pirate crew up for life, if they lived long enough to enjoy it. The most famous example occurred in 1628 when Dutch Admiral Piet Eng captured the entire Spanish treasure fleet, seizing cargo worth 11.5 million Dutch guilders, equivalent to roughly $500 million today. But here's where the story gets interesting. Within 2 years, almost every member of Hein's crew was either dead or penniless. The enormous windfall had been spent on wine, women, gambling, and various forms of celebration and excess. This pattern repeated itself countless times throughout the golden age of piracy. Pirates would risk everything for a chance at enormous wealth, then spend that wealth as quickly as they had acquired it. The psychological profile of most pirates helps explain this seemingly irrational behavior. Pirates were, by definition, men who had rejected the social norms and economic structures of their time. Many were former sailors who had experienced the harsh conditions aboard merchant or naval vessels, where they were treated little better than slaves, fed terrible food, paid poorly, and subjected to brutal discipline. Others were escaped indentured servants, runaway slaves, or men who had been pressed into naval service against their will. These men had learned not to trust in long-term promises or investments. They had seen how quickly fortune could turn, how easily a merchant could go bankrupt and leave his sailors unpaid, how readily a naval officer could have a sailor flogged to death for minor infractions. In their experience, the only wealth that mattered was the wealth you could hold in your hands and spend immediately. This created a culture of immediate gratification that permeated every aspect of pirate society. The conversion of stolen goods into spendable currency was the first major expense that pirates faced, and it was more complicated than most people realize. Pirates could simply sail into London or Boston Harbor with a cargo hold full of stolen Spanish silver and expect to be welcomed with open arms. They needed to work with networks of corrupt merchants, fence operations, and black market traders who specialized in converting pirated goods into legitimate currency. These conversion networks were sophisticated operations that spanned the entire Atlantic world. A typical transaction might involve a pirate crew selling stolen silver to a corrupt merchant in Jamaica, who would then ship it to a Confederate in New York, who would sell it to a goldsmith, who would melt it down and create new objects that bore no trace of their stolen origins. Each person in this chain took a substantial cut of the profits, often leaving pirates with only 30 or 40 cents on the dollar for their stolen goods. The island of Curaçao became a major center for these conversion operations, with Dutch merchants developing sophisticated systems for laundering pirated goods. The Dutch were officially at peace with Spain for much of the 17th and 18th centuries, but they had no qualms about profiting from Spanish losses. Curaçao's merchants would purchase stolen goods from pirates at discount prices, then sell them in legitimate markets across Europe and North America at full value, keeping the difference as profit. Madagascar also played a crucial role in pirate economics, particularly for pirates operating in the Indian Ocean. The island's remote location and lack of effective European control made it an ideal base for pirates targeting the rich trade routes between India and Europe. Pirates like Henry Every and Thomas Chew established bases on Madagascar where they could safely divide their loot, repair their ships, and trade with local merchants who asked no questions about the origins of their goods. The famous pirate settlement at Saint Marie Island off the coast of Madagascar became known as Libertalia, a utopian pirate republic where men of all races and nationalities could live as equals, sharing in the profits of their piratical enterprises. While many details about Libertalia may be legendary, archaeological evidence confirms that there was indeed a significant pirate settlement on Saint Marie Island, complete with warehouses, workshops, and other infrastructure needed to support a thriving pirate economy. Now, let's dive deep into the specific categories of pirate spending, starting with the most basic and essential expenses. Food and fresh water were literally matters of life and death for pirate crews, and the costs associated with provisioning a ship were enormous. A typical pirate vessel carrying 100 crew members would consume approximately 200 pounds of hardtack biscuits, 150 pounds of salt pork, 50 gallons of fresh water, and 10 gallons of rum every single day. Over the course of a 3-month voyage, this added up to massive quantities of supplies that had to be purchased at premium prices. Fresh vegetables and fruits were even more expensive but absolutely essential for preventing scurvy, a disease that killed more sailors than combat ever did. Scurvy was caused by vitamin C deficiency, and would begin to manifest after just a few weeks at sea without fresh produce. The early symptoms included fatigue, joint pain, and bleeding gums. If left untreated, scurvy would progress to tooth loss, internal bleeding, and eventually death. Pirates who wanted to maintain healthy crews had to budget substantial amounts for fresh provisions at every port of call. The famous British naval surgeon James Lind conducted his groundbreaking experiments on scurvy prevention in 1747, proving that citrus fruits could prevent and cure the disease. But pirates had discovered this connection decades earlier through practical experience. Dutch pirates operating in the Caribbean regularly purchased limes, oranges, and other citrus fruits, not because they understood the science behind vitamin C, but because they had observed that crews who ate these fruits stayed healthier longer. The cost of fresh water was often higher than the cost of alcohol, particularly in the Caribbean islands where freshwater sources were scarce. Pirates would pay premium prices for water that had been collected from mountain springs or rainwater cisterns, as seawater was completely useless for drinking and cooking. Some pirate ships carried special equipment for distilling seawater, but the process was slow, fuel-intensive, and produced only small quantities of barely drinkable water. Alcohol served multiple functions in pirate society beyond simple recreation. Beer and weak wine were often safer to drink than water, as the fermentation process killed many harmful bacteria. Stronger spirits, like rum, could be used as antiseptic for treating wounds, as a form of currency in trade negotiations, and as a morale booster during difficult times. The daily rum ration was considered such an essential part of naval life that it continued in the British Royal Navy until 1970. The production and trade of rum was intimately connected to the slave-based sugar economy of the Caribbean. Sugar plantations used enslaved African labor to produce raw sugar, which was then processed into molasses and distilled into rum. Pirates were both consumers of rum and participants in the slave trade that made rum production possible. Many pirates captured slave ships and sold their human cargo to plantation owners, using the proceeds to purchase the very rum that their victims had helped produce. Ship maintenance and repair represented the largest category of ongoing expenses for pirate operations, and the costs were staggering. A single cannon could cost more than most people earned in 5 years, and pirate ships typically carried between 10 and 40 cannons. These weren't just the cannons themselves, but also the specialized equipment needed to operate them. Gun carriages, rammers, spongers, priming, wires, powder horns, shot, and the various tools needed for maintenance and repair. The complexity of maintaining a cannon in working order was enormous. Each cannon had to be regularly cleaned to prevent rust and corrosion from salt air. The gunpowder had to be kept dry and properly stored to prevent accidental explosions. The shot had to be the correct size and weight for each specific cannon. The gun carriages had to be regularly maintained and replaced as the wood deteriorated from the shock of repeated firing. Iron cannons were incredibly heavy. A typical 12-pound cannon weighed over 3,000 pounds, and the weight distribution had to be carefully managed to prevent the ship from becoming dangerously top-heavy. Adding or replacing cannons required major modifications to the ship's structure, including reinforcing the deck beams, adding supporting timbers, and sometimes completely redesigning the ship's internal layout. Bronze cannons were lighter and more durable than iron ones, but they were also much more expensive. A bronzy 12-pounder could cost 10 times as much as an iron cannon of the same size. Only the most successful pirate captains could afford to arm their ships entirely with bronze cannons, and such weapons became status symbols within pirate society. The rigging of a pirate ship was a marvel of engineering complexity that required constant attention and regular replacement. A typical large pirate vessel might have over 50 different types of rope in various thicknesses, from thin signal lines to massive anchor cables. Each type of rope had a specific function and had to meet exacting standards for strength and durability. Hemp rope was the standard material for ship rigging, but it was expensive and had to be imported from specialized producers in Russia, the Baltic states, or North America. The process of making high-quality marine rope was labor-intensive and required skilled craftsmen. The hemp fibers had to be carefully selected, cleaned, and spun into yarn, which was then twisted into rope using complex machinery. The finished rope had to be treated with tar or other preservatives to resist decay from salt water and weather. The different types of rigging had different lifespans and replacement schedules. Running, rigging, the ropes used to control the sails, might last only 6 months under heavy use. Standing, rigging, the cables that supported the masts, might last 2 or 3 years if properly maintained. But a single storm or battle could destroy months' worth of rigging in a matter of hours, requiring immediate and expensive repairs. Sails represented another major category of expense. A full suit of sails for a large pirate ship could cost more than a small house and weighed several tons. Canvas for sails was made from linen or hemp, and had to be woven to exacting specifications. The canvas had to be strong enough to withstand the tremendous forces generated by wind and weather, but light enough that the crew could handle it manually. The process of making sails was incredibly labor-intensive. Each sail was cut from multiple pieces of canvas that had to be sewn together with precise attention to the grain of the fabric and the expected stress patterns. The edges had to be reinforced with rope bolt ropes, and grommets had to be installed at stress points. The finished sails then had to be fitted to the ship and adjusted for optimal performance. Different types of sails had different costs and lifespans. Course sails, the large square sails that provided the main propulsion, were the most expensive but also the most durable. Topsails and topgallants were lighter and less expensive, but also more delicate. Fore and aft sails, like jibs and staysails, were relatively inexpensive but crucial for maneuverability. Hull maintenance was perhaps the most technically challenging and expensive aspect of ship care. Wooden ships were constantly fighting a losing battle against the forces of nature. The wood would shrink and expand with changes in temperature and humidity, creating gaps that allowed water to seep in. Marine borers, like shipworms, would attack the hull from below the waterline, literally eating the ship from the outside in. The process of careening, hauling a ship onto a beach for hull maintenance, was a major operation that required weeks of work and substantial investment in materials and labor. The ship had to be completely unloaded and stripped of its rigging, then hauled onto a beach using a complex system of ropes, pulleys, and manual labor. The hull would then be scraped clean of barnacles and marine growth, damaged planks would be replaced, and the entire underwater portion would be treated with protective coatings. Copper sheathing became the preferred method of hull protection by the middle of the 18th century. But it was extremely expensive. A complete copper sheathing job could cost more than the original purchase price of the ship. But it provided superior protection against both marine borers and the accumulation of marine growth that slowed the ship's progress through the water. The tools and equipment needed for ship maintenance were specialized and expensive. Shipwrights used hundreds of different types of chisels, planes, saws, augers, and other tools, each designed for specific tasks. These tools had to be made from high-quality steel and properly maintained to remain effective. A single high-quality shipwright's adze could cost more than most people earned in a month. Caulking, the process of sealing the gaps between hull planks, required specialized materials and skills. Oakum, made from old rope fibers, was hammered into the seams between planks, then sealed with hot tar or pitch. The process was labor-intensive and had to be repeated regularly as the oakum deteriorated and the ship's hull shifted with age and use. Medical expenses represented another significant category of pirate spending that modern audiences often overlook. Life aboard a pirate ship was incredibly dangerous, with crew members facing constant risks from combat, accidents, and disease. Pirates couldn't rely on shore-based medical facilities, so they had to be prepared to handle medical emergencies at sea with their own resources. Surgical instruments were expensive and required specialized knowledge to use effectively. A basic surgical kit might include bone saws, forceps, scalpels, probes, and various other instruments, each of which had to be made from high-quality steel and properly maintained. Many pirates became skilled at performing emergency surgery, including amputations, which were often necessary after combat injuries or accidents with heavy machinery. The famous stereotype of pirates with wooden legs and hooks for hands wasn't entirely fictional. Amputations were common treatments for severely injured limbs, as they were often the only way to prevent fatal infections in an era before antibiotics. Pirates who survived amputations often had prosthetic devices made by local craftsmen, and some of these devices were surprisingly sophisticated. Medicine chests were essential equipment for any pirate ship, and they were stocked with a wide variety of drugs and remedies. Opium was used as a painkiller and sedative. Mercury was prescribed for syphilis and other ailments. Quinine was essential for treating malaria, and various herbal remedies were used for digestive problems, fevers, and other common ailments. These medicines were expensive and often had to be obtained through specialized suppliers. The famous incident involving Blackbeard and the medical supplies he demanded from Charleston demonstrates just how critical these expenses could be. In 1718, Blackbeard blockaded Charleston harbor and captured several prominent citizens as hostages. Rather than demanding gold or silver, Blackbeard's primary demand was for a chest of medical supplies. His crew was apparently suffering from some kind of epidemic, and they needed medicines more than they needed money. This incident also illustrates the sophisticated understanding of medical needs that many pirates possessed. Blackbeard's demand included specific medications, surgical instruments, and other supplies that indicated a detailed knowledge of medical requirements. This wasn't random pillaging, but a calculated attempt to address specific health problems affecting his crew. Now let's explore the more colorful aspects of pirate spending: entertainment, pleasure, and the pursuit of temporary escape from the harsh realities of life at sea. The taverns and brothels of pirate ports became legendary for their excesses, and the spending that took place in these establishments was truly spectacular. Pirates who had spent months living in cramped, dangerous conditions aboard ship were ready to pay almost any price for comfort, pleasure, and human companionship. Port Royal, Jamaica, before its destruction by earthquake in 1692, was perhaps the most famous example of a pirate spending paradise. Known as the wickedest city on earth, Port Royal was home to hundreds of taverns, gambling houses, brothels, and shops that catered specifically to pirates and privateers. The city was so wealthy from pirate money that its merchants competed fiercely to offer the most exotic and expensive goods and services. The taverns of Port Royal were legendary for their quality and variety. They imported the finest rum from across the Caribbean, wines from France and Spain, beer from England, and exotic spirits from around the world. Pirates would think nothing of paying a week's wages for a bottle of premium rum, and buying rounds for entire establishments was considered a mark of success and generosity. The famous Golden Ball Tavern in Port Royal was said to serve meals on solid gold plates and offer accommodations that rivaled the finest inns in London or Paris. The proprietor, a former pirate named John Taylor, understood his clientele perfectly and priced his services accordingly. A single night's lodging at the Golden Ball could cost more than most people earned in a month. But pirates, fresh from a successful voyage, were willing to pay for the luxury. Gambling was another major form of entertainment and expense in pirate ports. Pirates would engage in card games, dice games, cockfighting, and various other forms of wagering that could see enormous sums change hands in a matter of hours. The psychological profile of most pirates, risk-taking, impulsive, and oriented toward immediate gratification, made them natural gamblers who often bet far more than they could afford to lose. The most popular gambling games among pirates included piquet, cribbage, and various forms of dice games. These games were often played for stakes that would seem astronomical by modern standards. There are documented cases of pirates wagering their entire share of a treasure haul on a single hand of cards, losing everything they had earned in months of dangerous work. Charles Vane, one of the most notorious pirates of the early 18th century, was reportedly such a compulsive gambler that his crew eventually voted him out of command, because he kept gambling away their shares of captured treasure. Vane's gambling addiction was so severe that he once lost an entire ship, along with all its equipment and supplies, in a single night of dice games in Nassau. The company of women was another major expense for pirates visiting port towns. After months at sea with an all-male crew, many pirates were eager to spend time with women, and the brothels and courtesan houses of pirate ports were well equipped to meet this demand. These establishments ranged from crude waterfront brothels to elegant houses that catered to the most successful pirate captains. The women who worked in these establishments were often as colorful and adventurous as the pirates themselves. Many were former indentured servants, who had completed their terms of service, escaped slaves, who had found freedom in the chaotic world of pirate ports, or women from Europe, who had chosen the dangerous but potentially lucrative life of serving pirate clientele. Some of these women became famous in their own right. Mary Read and Anne Bonny, who served as pirates aboard Calico Jack Rackham's ship. Both had backgrounds that connected them to the world of pirate ports and entertainment establishments. Their stories illustrate the complex relationships that could develop between pirates and the women they encountered in port. The costs associated with female companionship varied enormously, depending on the establishment and the services provided. A night with a common prostitute might cost a few pieces of eight, while an evening with an elegant courtesan could cost more than a year's wages for an ordinary sailor. Some pirates formed long-term relationships with women in port towns and would support them financially between voyages. Fashion and personal appearance were surprisingly important to many pirates, contrary to the popular image of them as unkempt seafarers. When pirates reached port with money to spend, one of their first priorities was often to improve their appearance and display their success through fine clothing and accessories. Silk shirts were particularly popular among pirates, as silk was expensive, comfortable, and demonstrated sophistication and wealth. A high-quality silk shirt could cost more than most people earned in several months, but pirates viewed it as a worthwhile investment in their image and status. Velvet coats, fine leather boots, and elaborately decorated hats were other popular purchases. The famous pirate captain, Bartholomew Roberts, was known for his elegant dress sense and would regularly spend enormous sums on fine clothing. Roberts reportedly owned dozens of silk shirts, velvet coats in various colors, and a collection of hats decorated with feathers and precious metals. His wardrobe was said to be worth more than most people's entire estates. Jewelry was another popular form of pirate spending, serving both aesthetic and practical purposes. Gold and silver chains, rings, earrings, and other ornaments were not just decorative. They were a form of portable wealth that could be quickly converted to cash if necessary. Many pirates had their ears pierced specifically to wear valuable earrings, a practice that was considered quite fashionable among seafaring men of the era. The practice of ear piercing among pirates may have had practical origins as well as aesthetic ones. Some maritime folklore suggested that pierced ears improved eyesight, though there was no scientific basis for this belief. Others believed that gold earrings would pay for a proper burial if a pirate's body washed up on shore, though this too was more superstition than practical planning. Personal weapons represented both practical necessities and status symbols for pirates. While most pirates were issued basic weapons as part of their share of ship equipment, successful pirates would invest in higher quality personal weapons that reflected their status and fighting skills. A high-quality sword could cost several hundred pieces of eight and represent months of wages for an ordinary sailor. But, for a pirate captain, a fine sword was an essential tool of leadership and intimidation. The famous pirate captain William Kidd carried a silver-hilted sword that was reportedly worth more than most people's houses, and he used it not just as a weapon but as a symbol of his authority and success. Pistols were even more expensive than swords, as they required more sophisticated manufacturing techniques and were more prone to malfunction. A matched pair of pistols could cost more than a small ship, but they were essential tools for pirate captains who needed to project authority and defend themselves in close combat. The famous pirate Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, was known for carrying multiple pistols into battle, often wearing 6 or more pistols across his chest on specially designed bandoliers. These weapons weren't just functional. They were part of Blackbeard's carefully cultivated image as a fearsome and successful pirate captain. Ammunition and gunpowder were ongoing expenses that pirates had to budget for carefully. Black powder was expensive to manufacture and degraded quickly in the humid conditions aboard ship, so pirates needed to regularly purchase fresh supplies. A single barrel of quality gunpowder could cost more than most people earned in several months. Lead for bullets was also costly and had to be obtained from specialized suppliers. Many pirates learned to cast their own bullets to save money, but this required investment in bullet molds, furnaces, and other equipment. Some pirates would melt down pewter plates, lead shot, and other metal objects to create ammunition, but the quality of such improvised bullets was often poor. The famous pirate captain Henry Morgan was known for his attention to weapons and ammunition quality. Morgan insisted that his crews use only the finest gunpowder and properly cast bullets, arguing that inferior ammunition was a false dichotomy that could cost lives in battle. His investment in quality weapons and ammunition was one of the factors that made him one of the most successful pirates of his era. Now, let's explore the more sophisticated aspects of pirate spending: investments, bribes, and the complex systems of corruption that allowed pirate operations to function in an era when piracy was theoretically illegal and punishable by death. Many pirates engaged in what we might recognize today as business investments, though these investments were often colored by the unique requirements and opportunities of pirate life. Bribery and protection represented one of the most important categories of pirate spending, and the sums involved were often enormous. Colonial governors, port officials, naval officers, and merchant princes throughout the Caribbean and American colonies were often quite willing to look the other way when it came to pirate activities, provided they received appropriate compensation. The relationship between pirates and colonial officials was complex and mutually beneficial. Pirates provided colonial governments with valuable intelligence about Spanish activities, served as an unofficial navy against Spanish expansion, and brought enormous amounts of wealth into colonial ports. In return, colonial officials provided pirates with safe harbors, assistance in converting stolen goods to cash, advance warning of naval patrols, and sometimes even official letters of marque that gave pirates a thin veneer of legal protection. The most famous example of this kind of arrangement was the relationship between pirates and the colonial government of Jamaica. For decades, Jamaican governors issued letters of marque to pirate captains, officially designating them as privateers in service to the crown. These privateers would then attack Spanish shipping and settlements, sharing a percentage of their profits with the colonial government. Sir Henry Morgan exemplified this system at its most sophisticated level. Morgan received official backing from the Jamaican government for his raids against Spanish targets, and he shared his profits with colonial officials who provided him with men, ships, and supplies. The arrangement was so profitable for all involved that Morgan eventually accumulated enough wealth and political connections to be knighted by King Charles II and appointed Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. The costs of maintaining these relationships were substantial. A single payment to a corrupt governor might cost several thousand pieces of eight, but it could provide protection worth tens of thousands in avoided losses. Pirates would also invest in network maintenance, regular smaller payments to port officials, tavern keepers, merchants, and others who could provide information, services, or protection. The island of New Providence in the Bahamas became a major center for these kinds of arrangements. The colonial government was weak and corrupt, and pirates were essentially able to purchase official protection for their operations. Pirates would pay regular tribute to colonial officials in exchange for the right to use Nassau as a base of operations, and the arrangement worked well for everyone involved until the British government decided to crack down on Caribbean piracy in the early 18th century. Some pirates took a more direct approach to investment by purchasing legitimate businesses that could serve as fronts for their piratical activities. Taverns were particularly popular investments, as they provided a natural gathering place for pirate crews and a legitimate source of income between voyages. A well-located tavern in a major port could generate substantial profits and serve as a base of operations for pirate activities. Pirates would also invest in shipping companies, trading houses, and warehouses that could be used to launder stolen goods and provide cover for their operations. These businesses required significant capital investments, but could provide both legitimate income and useful services for pirate operations. Thomas Tew, one of the most successful pirates of the late 17th century, invested heavily in legitimate shipping ventures that complemented his piratical activities. Tew used his legitimate shipping business to gather intelligence about valuable cargoes, recruit crew members, and provide cover for his pirate vessels. The arrangement was so successful that Tew was able to operate with virtual impunity for several years. Real estate was another popular investment among successful pirates. Land ownership provided security, status, and a potential source of legitimate income that could support a pirate's retirement from active service. Pirates would purchase plantations, urban properties, and commercial buildings that could generate rental income or agricultural profits. The island of Jamaica became a major destination for pirate real estate investments, as the colonial government was relatively tolerant of pirates who invested their wealth locally. Pirates would purchase sugar plantations, coffee estates, and cattle ranches that provided both legitimate income and useful cover for their activities. Henry Morgan's plantation investments in Jamaica were particularly extensive and sophisticated. Morgan used his piratical profits to purchase several large sugar plantations, complete with enslaved labor forces and all the equipment needed for sugar production. These plantations provided Morgan with a legitimate source of wealth and social respectability that complemented his more adventurous activities. Some pirates invested in more exotic ventures that reflected their global reach and adventurous spirit. There are records of pirates funding exploration expeditions, investing in mining operations, and even backing scientific research. The line between piracy, exploration, and legitimate commerce was often quite blurred in the colonial era, and successful pirates understood that diversifying their investments was essential for long-term survival and prosperity. Captain William Kidd's investments exemplified this kind of diversified approach. Before his career took a tragic turn, Kidd invested in New York real estate, shipping ventures, and various trading operations. He also married into a wealthy New York family and cultivated relationships with prominent merchants and colonial officials. These investments provided Kidd with social respectability and legitimate income that complemented his more questionable activities. The famous pirate captain Samuel Bellamy invested heavily in what we might today call venture capital, providing funding for young merchants and traders who could not obtain capital through traditional sources. Bellamy would provide ships, equipment, and operating capital to ambitious young men in exchange for a share of their profits. This kind of investment was risky but potentially very profitable, and it helped create networks of loyal associates who could provide services and information. Education and self-improvement represented another surprising category of pirate investment. While the popular image of pirates as illiterate thugs persists, historical evidence suggests that many pirates were actually quite literate and numerate, skills that were essential for navigation, record-keeping, and the complex business of converting stolen goods into usable currency. Some pirates hired tutors to improve their reading and writing skills, or to learn foreign languages that would be useful in their trade. Spanish was particularly valuable for pirates operating in the Caribbean, as much of their prey consisted of Spanish treasure fleets and merchant vessels. French was useful for trading in certain ports, while Portuguese could be essential for operating along the coast of Brazil. The famous pirate captain Bartholomew Roberts was known for his literacy and kept detailed records of his voyages and captures. Roberts invested in books, maps, and educational materials that helped him become one of the most successful pirates of his era. His investment in education paid substantial dividends in terms of his ability to plan successful operations and avoid capture. Navigation was another area where pirates invested heavily in education and equipment. The ability to accurately determine a ship's position and plot a course was literally a matter of life and death for pirates, who often operated far from familiar coastlines and couldn't rely on regular shipping lanes for guidance. Quality navigational instruments were extremely expensive, but essential for successful pirate operations. A good quadrant or octant could cost more than most people earned in a year, but it was invaluable for determining latitude and longitude. Chronometers for determining longitude were even more expensive and were considered among the most valuable items a pirate could own. Maps and charts were expensive but essential purchases for pirate captains. Accurate charts of Caribbean waters, the American coast, or African coastlines could cost more than a small house, but they were invaluable for planning raids, finding safe harbors, and avoiding naval patrols. Some pirates became so skilled at chart-making that they could sell their services to other captains, creating an additional revenue stream beyond traditional piracy. The famous pirate captain Howell Davis was known for his exceptional navigational skills and invested heavily in the finest instruments and charts available. Davis's investment in navigation equipment allowed him to operate successfully in African waters, where few European pirates had ventured before. His success in these waters earned him enormous profits and established him as one of the most innovative pirates of his era. Books were another unexpected expense for many educated pirates. While space and weight were at a premium aboard ship, many pirate captains maintained small libraries of books on navigation, medicine, languages, and other practical subjects. Some pirates were genuinely intellectual and collected books on philosophy, history, or literature. Stede Bonnet, known as the Gentleman Pirate, maintained an extensive library aboard his ship and was known for his love of reading. Bonnet's library included works on navigation, medicine, law, history, and literature, and he was said to spend hours reading when weather and circumstances permitted. His investment in books reflected his background as an educated gentleman, but it also provided practical benefits for his piratical career. The economic impact of pirate spending extended far beyond the pirates themselves and created entire industries and economic ecosystems that depended on pirate money. Shipbuilders, sailmakers, rope manufacturers, weapons producers, and countless other craftsmen and suppliers found lucrative markets serving pirate customers who were willing to pay premium prices for quality goods and services. The shipbuilding industry in particular benefited enormously from pirate spending. Pirates needed fast, well-armed vessels that could outrun naval patrols and overpower merchant ships. This created demand for specialized ship designs and modifications that pushed the boundaries of naval architecture. The famous shipbuilders of Jamaica, Bermuda, and the American colonies developed innovative designs specifically for pirate customers. These ships emphasized speed and maneuverability over cargo capacity, and they incorporated design features that made them ideal for piratical operations. The costs of these specialized vessels were enormous. A custom-built pirate ship could cost more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. The famous pirate ship Adventure Galley, commanded by Captain Kidd, was built specifically for pirate operations and incorporated the latest advances in naval design. The weapons industry also benefited substantially from pirate spending. Pirates needed high-quality firearms, edged weapons, and artillery that could give them advantages in combat. This created demand for specialized weapons that were often more advanced than those used by regular naval forces. The famous gunsmiths of London, Birmingham, and other European centers developed specialized firearms for pirate customers. These weapons emphasized reliability, stopping power, and ease of use in the challenging conditions of naval combat. The costs of these specialized weapons were enormous, but pirates understood that superior weaponry could mean the difference between success and failure, or life and death. The textile industry also profited from pirate spending on clothing and ship equipment. Pirates needed high-quality canvas for sails, rope and cordage for rigging, and fine fabrics for clothing and personal items. The specialized requirements of maritime use created demand for premium products that commanded premium prices. The famous sailmakers of London, Amsterdam, and other major ports developed specialized techniques for creating canvas that could withstand the harsh conditions of maritime use. This canvas was expensive to produce, but essential for ships that might spend months at sea in challenging weather conditions. As piracy became more sophisticated and profitable, It also attracted the attention of legitimate investors who saw opportunities to profit from pirate operations without directly participating in illegal activities. These investors would provide ships, equipment, and supplies to pirate crews in exchange for shares of captured treasure. This arrangement allowed wealthy merchants and even government officials to profit from piracy while maintaining plausible deniability about their involvement. The famous case of Captain Kidd illustrates how complex these investment relationships could become. Kidd's voyage was financed by a syndicate of wealthy investors that included prominent politicians and merchants. These investors provided Kidd with a ship, supplies, and operating capital in exchange for a share of any treasure he captured. When Kidd's voyage ended in disaster, these investors found themselves implicated in piracy charges, despite never having set foot aboard a pirate ship. The insurance industry also developed in response to pirate activities, with merchants purchasing policies to protect their cargoes against pirate attacks. Paradoxically, some of the same investors who funded pirate operations also invested in insurance companies that paid claims for pirate attacks. This created a complex web of conflicting interests, where the same individuals could profit from both sides of pirate activities. The banking and credit systems of the colonial era were also deeply influenced by pirate economics. Pirates needed ways to store and transfer wealth, but they couldn't rely on traditional banking services that required legal documentation and government oversight. This created demand for informal banking services provided by merchants, goldsmiths, and other business people who could handle pirate money without asking too many questions. Some of these informal bankers became enormously wealthy by serving pirate clientele. They would hold pirate deposits, arrange money transfers, exchange currencies, and provide credit services at premium rates. The risks were substantial. Pirate clients might be arrested, killed, or simply disappear. But the profits were enormous for those who managed the risks successfully. The famous merchant house of Moses Levy in New York became one of the most important financial intermediaries for pirates operating in American waters. Levy provided banking services, currency exchange, and investment opportunities for pirates who needed ways to manage their wealth. His services were expensive but reliable, and his clientele included some of the most successful pirates of the early 18th century. The conversion of pirated goods into spendable currency created entire industries dedicated to laundering stolen property. Goldsmiths would melt down stolen jewelry and create new pieces that bore no trace of their origins. Silversmiths would do the same with stolen silver plate and coins. Textile merchants would dye stolen fabrics to change their appearance and remove identifying marks. These laundering operations were sophisticated businesses that required substantial capital investments and skilled craftsmen. The goldsmiths and silversmiths who served pirate customers needed expensive equipment, raw materials, and workshop facilities. They also needed extensive knowledge of precious metals, gemstones, and various crafting techniques that could disguise the origins of stolen goods. The famous goldsmith Jacob Hayes of New York operated one of the most sophisticated precious metal laundering operations in colonial America. Hayes would purchase stolen gold and silver from pirates at discount prices, then use his skills and equipment to transform these materials into new products that could be sold in legitimate markets. His profits were enormous, and he eventually became one of the wealthiest men in New York. The spice and exotic goods trade was another industry that benefited substantially from pirate activities. Pirates operating in the Indian Ocean and Asian waters captured enormous quantities of spices, silks, precious stones, and other exotic goods that were in high demand in European and American markets. These goods required specialized knowledge to evaluate and market effectively. Merchants who specialized in exotic goods developed extensive networks for purchasing and reselling pirated materials. They needed warehouses, transportation systems, and marketing networks that could handle goods from around the world. The profits were substantial, but the risks were also significant. Possession of obviously stolen goods could result in criminal charges and financial ruin. The famous merchant house of Frederick Phillips in New York became one of the most important dealers in exotic pirated goods on the American continent. Phillips had extensive connections with pirates operating in the Indian Ocean, and he provided them with ships, supplies, and financial services in exchange for shares of their captured cargoes. His business eventually made him one of the wealthiest men in colonial America. The slave trade was intimately connected to pirate economics in ways that modern audiences often find disturbing. Many pirates captured slave ships and sold their human cargo to plantation owners, using the proceeds to finance their operations. This created a horrific cycle where enslaved Africans were treated as just another form of commodity to be stolen, sold, and converted into pirate profits. The economics of the slave trade were particularly brutal because enslaved people represented high-value cargo that could be quickly converted into cash. A single captured slave ship might carry several hundred people who could be sold for substantial profits. Pirates who specialized in capturing slave ships could earn enormous sums with relatively little risk compared to attacking heavily defended treasure fleets. Some pirates also used enslaved labor on their own vessels and bases. Enslaved people were forced to work as sailors, craftsmen, cooks, and laborers who maintained pirate operations. This labor was essentially free, allowing pirates to reduce their operating costs and increase their profits. The famous pirate base at Madagascar employed hundreds of enslaved people, who were forced to build and maintain the infrastructure that supported pirate operations. The treatment of enslaved people in pirate society varied considerably depending on individual circumstances and the attitudes of specific pirate crews. Some enslaved people were eventually freed and became crew members, while others remained in bondage throughout their lives. The democratic ideals that many pirate crews espoused did not typically extend to enslaved people. Highlighting the contradictions and moral limitations of pirate society, the impact of pirate spending on local economies was often dramatic and sometimes destructive. Port towns that became centers of pirate activity would experience rapid economic growth. As pirates spent their wealth on goods and services, local merchants, craftsmen, and service providers could become wealthy almost overnight by catering to free-spending pirate customers. However, this economic growth was often unsustainable and ultimately destructive. Pirate money was essentially stolen wealth that was being rapidly consumed, rather than invested in productive activities. When pirate activities declined or moved elsewhere, the local economy would often collapse, leaving behind empty buildings, unpaid debts, and unemployed workers. The famous case of Port Royal, Jamaica, illustrates both the benefits and dangers of an economy based on pirate spending. Before its destruction by earthquake in 1692, Port Royal was one of the wealthiest cities in the Americas, with a standard of living that rivaled European capitals. The city's prosperity was built almost entirely on pirate money, with local merchants and service providers becoming wealthy by serving pirate customers. When the earthquake destroyed Port Royal, it also marked the end of Jamaica's golden age of pirate prosperity. The colonial government had already begun to crack down on piracy, and the destruction of Port Royal provided an opportunity to rebuild the city. Without the pirate influence that had made it famous. The new Port Royal never achieved the wealth and prominence of its predecessor, and many former residents found themselves impoverished. Nassau, in the Bahamas, provides another example of the boom and bust cycle that characterized pirate economies. During the early 18th century, Nassau became the unofficial capital of Caribbean piracy, home to famous captains like Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Calico Jack Rackham. The town's economy was almost entirely dependent on pirate spending, with local merchants and service providers prospering from the constant influx of pirate wealth. The pirates of Nassau created their own informal government and economic system, complete with rules for dividing treasure, resolving disputes, and managing communal resources. They established a kind of pirate republic that operated independently of any colonial authority, funded entirely by the proceeds of piracy. For several years, this system worked remarkably well, providing security and prosperity for both pirates and the local civilian population. However, Nassau's pirate republic ultimately proved unsustainable. When the British government decided to seriously suppress Caribbean piracy, they sent Woodes Rogers as the new colonial governor, with a fleet of warships and orders to eliminate the pirate presence. Rogers offered pardons to pirates who surrendered and harsh punishment to those who resisted. Many pirates accepted the pardons and attempted to transition to legitimate activities. But the economic system that had grown up around pirate spending collapsed almost overnight. The psychological aspects of pirate spending patterns reveal fascinating insights into human behavior under extreme conditions. Pirates operated in an environment where death was a constant possibility, and where traditional social structures and economic relationships had been abandoned. This created unique psychological pressures that manifested in distinctive spending behaviors. The concept of easy come, easy go was deeply embedded in pirate culture. But it reflected more than just carelessness with money. Pirates understood that their careers were likely to be short and violent, and that saving money for a future they might not live to see was essentially pointless. This created a rational basis for immediate consumption that was reinforced by the social dynamics of pirate crews. Pirate crews operated as democratic communities where members shared equally in captured treasure. This meant that individual pirates received their share of wealth as irregular lump sums, rather than as steady wages. Without experience in managing large amounts of money, and with limited opportunities to invest safely, many pirates would simply spend until the money was gone, then return to piracy to earn more. The social dynamics of pirate ports also encouraged rapid spending. Pirates who had just returned from successful voyages were expected to display their success through generous spending on drinks, entertainment, and gifts for friends and crew members. A pirate who appeared stingy or overly concerned with saving money might find himself excluded from future voyages or treated with suspicion by his peers. The temporary nature of pirate partnerships also discouraged long-term financial planning. Pirate crews were constantly changing as members left to join other crews, were killed in battle, or simply disappeared. This instability made it difficult to form the kind of long-term relationships and trust that are necessary for serious business partnerships or investments. Pirates learned to live in the moment, because the moment was all they could count on. Many pirates also struggled with what modern psychologists might recognize as symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental health conditions. The hypervigilance required to survive in pirate society, combined with regular exposure to violence and death, created psychological states that were not conducive to long-term planning or financial responsibility. Pirates often spent money compulsively, as if the act of spending could somehow ward off the dangers they faced. The gambling habits that were so common among pirates reflect these psychological pressures. Gambling provided both entertainment and a way to cope with the stress and uncertainty of pirate life. The act of risking money on games of chance paralleled the risks that pirates took in their professional lives, and winning at gambling could provide temporary feelings of control and success that helped counteract the powerlessness that many pirates felt in other aspects of their lives. However, gambling also provided a socially acceptable way for pirates to lose money that they did not know how to manage effectively. A pirate who lost his share of treasure in a gambling game could blame bad luck rather than poor financial judgment, preserving his reputation and self-esteem while eliminating the burden of managing wealth he wasn't equipped to handle. The relationships that pirates formed with the women they encountered in port towns also reflect the psychological dynamics of pirate spending. These relationships provided temporary companionship, sexual gratification, and emotional support that helped counteract the isolation and stress of life at sea. The money that pirates spent on these relationships was often as much about purchasing emotional comfort as physical pleasure. Some of these relationships became genuinely meaningful to the pirates involved, providing them with connections to normal human society that their chosen profession had largely cut them off from. Pirates would sometimes send money to women in port towns between voyages, or make financial provisions for children born from these relationships. These expenditures represented attempts to maintain human connections and create some kind of legacy beyond their piratical activities. The cultural impact of pirate spending patterns extends far beyond their historical period and continues to influence popular culture, economic theory, and social attitudes toward money and risk-taking. The image of pirates as free-spending, life-for-the-moment adventurers has become deeply embedded in our collective imagination, influencing everything from literature and movies to modern business practices and personal financial attitudes. The phrase "living like a pirate" has entered common usage to describe someone who spends money freely and enjoys life without worrying about the future. This romanticized view of pirate economics ignores the harsh realities of pirate life. The violence, disease, social isolation, and early death that characterized most pirate careers. But it captures something appealing about the pirate attitude toward money and pleasure. Modern economists have studied pirate spending patterns as examples of what happens when people operate with extremely short time horizons and high levels of uncertainty. The pirate economy provides insights into consumer behavior under extreme conditions and helps explain why some people spend impulsively, while others save and invest for the future. The psychological pressures that led pirates to spend rapidly are similar to those faced by people in modern high-stress, high-risk professions. The gambling industry has drawn specific lessons from pirate spending patterns. Pirates were notorious for their gambling habits, and modern casinos use similar psychological techniques to encourage rapid spending among their customers. The pirate mentality of easy come, easy go is actively cultivated by gambling establishments, which understand that customers who view money as temporary and expendable are more likely to spend freely. The venture capital and startup industries have also adopted some aspects of the pirate approach to risk and reward. Like pirates, modern entrepreneurs and investors often operate with high levels of uncertainty and the understanding that most ventures will fail quickly. The pirate model of high risk, high reward, and rapid decision-making has influenced modern business culture in ways that are not always immediately apparent. The pirate approach to organizational structure and profit sharing has influenced modern management theory and business practices. Pirate crews were remarkably democratic for their time, with members voting on major decisions and sharing equally in profits. This model has been adopted by various modern organizations that emphasize employee ownership, democratic decision-making, and performance-based compensation. However, the pirate model also demonstrates the limitations and dangers of short-term thinking and immediate gratification. The economic system that grew up around pirate spending was ultimately unsustainable and destructive. Pirates created no new wealth, but simply redistributed existing wealth through force and theft. The environmental and social costs of pirate activities were enormous, and the benefits were concentrated among a relatively small group of successful pirates and their associates. The pirate experience offers both cautionary tales and inspiring examples of human creativity and adaptability under difficult circumstances. Pirates created innovative solutions to complex problems, developed sophisticated systems for managing risk and sharing rewards, and demonstrated that it was possible to build successful communities based on voluntary association rather than traditional authority structures. But they also showed the destructive potential of rejecting all social constraints and moral limitations. The pirate emphasis on individual freedom and immediate gratification ultimately led to social chaos, economic destruction, and enormous human suffering. The same impulses that made pirates successful adventurers and innovators also made them dangerous criminals and social parasites. The lessons we can draw from pirate economics are complex and sometimes contradictory. The pirate experience demonstrates both the creative potential and the destructive consequences of living entirely in the present, without regard for the future. It shows how economic systems can emerge spontaneously from human needs and desires, but also how these systems can become unsustainable and ultimately Perhaps the most important lesson is the need for balance between present enjoyment and future security, between individual freedom and social responsibility, between risk-taking and prudent planning. The pirates who survived and prospered were those who managed to balance their natural inclinations toward adventure and immediate gratification with more prudent, long-term thinking and investment. Modern people facing economic uncertainty and social change might learn from both the successes and failures of pirate economics. We can admire the pirate spirit of adventure, innovation, and democratic cooperation while also recognizing the importance of sustainable practices, ethical behavior, and long-term planning. The story of how pirates spent their treasure ultimately reveals fundamental truths about human nature, economic systems, and the eternal struggle between security and freedom. Pirates chose freedom over security, adventure over stability, and immediate pleasure over long-term planning. These choices brought them both great joy and great suffering, enormous wealth and crushing poverty, legendary fame and ignominious death. Their experience reminds us that economic choices are never just about money. They're about values, priorities, and the kind of life we want to live. Pirates made their choices consciously, accepting the risks and consequences in exchange for the freedom to live life on their own terms. Whether we admire or condemn their choices, we can learn from their experience and perhaps make better choices for ourselves and our communities. In the end, the treasure that pirates left behind isn't found in buried chests on remote islands. It's found in the lessons their experience teaches us about human nature, economic behavior, and the complex relationships between individual freedom and social responsibility. That treasure is still with us today, waiting to be discovered by anyone wise enough to learn from their fascinating, tragic, and ultimately very human story. The pirates are long gone, but their legacy lives on in the choices we make about how to balance our own desires for freedom, security, adventure, and responsibility in our modern world.